everybody say hi to Hannah and Sage and Allison.
Hi,
Oh, I'm sorry. No, Haynes, hi to you too. Oh, sorry. What?
Sage.
Oh, Sage, you're here today? Oh, sorry. Sage, why did I think you were?
Guess what that is? Guess what that
We're gonna try this again. Don't worry, we always have this issue. Why won't it let me do that? There we go. All right, take a look here because we're talking about interest. And these are pretty much three areas where everybody, you're only about 8 years away from this here. Three different places where you'll see interest. The title of this is actually called, so you probably should have a blank piece of paper. And on top right, consumer interest. Yeah, for those of you that struggle with the extra credit spelling word we've had all the time.
It's mort.
I got it. I know.
Under consumer interest, and at some point in your life, you will face all three of these, I'm relatively sure. It's kind of the American way. I will get off my soapbox and saying that, as a country, we'd be better off if people wouldn't spend money that they didn't have. Okay, it's pretty much a new concept. 100 years ago, very rarely would anybody borrow money for anything at all. And they were actually very much against doing that because people didn't like to owe people money. However, in modern day things, since houses and cars cost so much, I guess you have no option. I mean, you could try to live with your parents until you've accumulated $300,000 or whatever, but back in the day, and that's kind of what got our country in this whole problem we've been in the last, since 2008. It's been 5 years since things have crashed and burned, because people borrowed way too much money and they couldn't pay it back, and when you can't pay it back, the bank has to take it back and do that. But anyways, so the first one is the mortgage there. If you look at the top there, it says mortgage is the money borrowed to buy a home. It's called a mortgage. If a person borrows $300,000 at about 7% fixed interest for 30 years, then the borrower makes equal monthly payments of about $2,000. Monthly payment pays the current interest and the small amount of the $300,000 principal. If the borrower continues to make mortgage payments for 30 years, 360 monthly payments until the loan is repaid, then the sum of the payments will be about $720,000. That includes the $300,000 originally, and then you pay $420,000 in finance charges. Okay, and that's something for you to think about there. The more money you borrow, the more you pay in finance charges. Now, the nice thing today is that, anybody know what interest rates are? They're as low as they've probably been almost in history. They're 4%. At times in our history, the interest rates were 18% or 16% back in the early 80s or 70s or something like that. Which if interest rates were 14%, you could just double this. How much would you pay in finance charges? $840,000 if you were borrowing that much money. Okay, now remember this $2,000 a month in payments does not include what you probably have to pay in real estate taxes. So just put this in perspective here. Let's say your mortgage payment is $2,000, and what do you suppose real estate taxes on your house cost? Just take a plot, I guess. So John,
10,000.
let's just put $10,000 because if you're buying a $300,000 house, that's not too far. So how much is that a month? My kids, are we in math class or what are we here? $800, let's say, because that's $960.
Are we in math class or social studies?
Well, we're not talking about what town we live in, Jack. So
That's not the only thing we talk about in social studies.
oh, it's not? I have been so sorely mistaken for all these years. So $2,800. Now wait, we're not done yet, because when you buy a $300,000 house, what else do you also need to put on it? You've got to have it insured. How much is insurance probably on a $300,000 house? I don't know, probably
2,000.
no, probably $600 or $700. Probably nothing more than maybe another $600 $70 a month. $2,870.
I'm never.
So, Sage Eye, put this in perspective here, okay? If you're paying this for 12 months, 0, 14, 16, 17, 5, 0, 0, 7, 8, 2, 0, 4, did I do something wrong? Just for your house. Just to pay just for the place you live, and this is not utility bills, this isn't paying your gas. You have to have a job making $34,000 a year, 34, almost $35,000. Now, Lucas, that doesn't sound bad to Lucas. Let's break this down into what somebody would actually earn in a year. At $34,000 a year, divide that by 50, how much would you have to make a week? Anybody got a calculator? Nick, where's my calculator? I don't want to bore you with all me doing the calculations here, but you should be able to figure it out. It's about what? I saw that. That was funny the first time. $34,000. Let's just round that to that. Divide it by 52 since I have a calculator here. $34,000. What does this thing work? Divided by 52.
China group.
All right, you have to pay $653 a week.
Oh, that's not even.
That's not bad.
Now, okay, so let's say, well, what's your typical hourly work week?
10,000.
I work 40 hours for a living, 40 hours a week for a living, divide that by 40. Well, you have to make $16 an hour. Oh my God. $16 an hour, that's just for the house you live in. And again, there's no food included in that, there's no gas, there's no electric, there's no incidentals, there's nothing there.
Just marry someone rich and everything will be solved.
Now, Lauren brings up a good point, and again, that's kind of our modern day thought process. Usually there's two people earning money in the thing there. So they need to make at least $8 each, working full time. Now, minimum wage, mind you, right now is a little over $8. So, now mind you, you're gonna have yourself a house, but it won't be warm. You won't be able to have a cell phone. You won't have any food, no cars, no clothes,
No TV.
no television or cable. But you will have your $300,000.
No furniture.
Yeah,
You'll be sleeping on the floor. And then eventually they'll.
Okay, enough of that. Lest we digress here. Nick, did you have a question here? Were you gonna say something?
Oh yeah, but you don't have to pay it all at once. You get paid.
No, what don't you have to pay at once?
You don't have to pay $8 a day. You have to just wait until it pays.
So basically.
Well, and I tell you, that makes it harder. So you always think you have money, and then at the end of the month, when you have to pay this $3,000 house bill, you don't have
It's like a
anything.
nice house, like a smile.
That's a pretty $300,000 house.
Well, can't you just live in an apartment and
Those
like,
are like
Yes,
$1,000
you
a
could
month.
rent out.
No, yeah, absolutely. And that's a good point. You shouldn't live more than your means at this stage. No, that's a good point. I'm not. All right, the next one here. Auto loans. If you're talking about interest for auto cars, it's really the same principle, except car loans usually charge a lot more interest because you're borrowing a smaller amount of money for a shorter amount of time. And the bad thing about cars is, okay, they're worth so much less as soon as you drive it off the lot, and the more you use them, the less they're worth. Okay. Well, I mean, the more you drive it, the more miles it's on it, it's going to break down. You're going to have to keep fixing it. It's blah blah blah. Cars are probably the single biggest losing money adventure people ever go into, especially if you buy a brand new car, because as soon as you drive that car off of the lot, you will never, it's used, and you will never ever get anywhere near what you paid for it. Nobody would ever pay you anywhere close to what you paid for it, even if you just drove it up the driveway and out the door. Because once it's used, it's going to lose, who knows, 10% or whatever. And rarely it's like kind of like a money pit. They're higher interest rates. They're for shorter amounts of times. I mean, it's not uncommon for people to be paying, I don't know, what's this say here? Somebody who buys a $20,000 car, pays for it in 3 years at 7% interest, will pay about $622 a month for a car. Okay, and that's why when you see TV commercials about cars or hear it on the radio, they'll say 60 months, 0%. Okay, car companies, if they want to sell cars, a lot of times will tell you you don't have any interest to pay at all as long as you pay it off in 6 or 5 years or whatever it is. So people go for that. There's always kind of deals out there. But again, you're going to pay $2,000 in interest on a $20,000 car. Again, that's you're just paying money so that you can borrow money from people. Nick Shanks?
Wait, so that person borrowed their whole house, or was the house a little more?
Well,
Did they
that
borrow-
says they borrowed $300,000. Usually, you have to have X amount of money to buy a house. Usually, you have to put a down payment on it, which means you have to pay. A lot of times, it's 10%, maybe 20%. So you'd have to have $30,000 to buy this house in the bank, where you say, "Here's my $30,000." Boom. And why would that have to be? Why do you suppose somebody would say you have to have a little bit of money to put down on a house? Huh?
So they can leave it.
Yes. So they know, because the bank, see, anybody that loans money to somebody needs to know that they can get at least their money back again if you don't make your payments. And if you put $30,000 down on a house, that means if you never made a payment, the bank should be able to sell that house back. And they've got that $30,000 window where they might not lose all of the money that they loaned you, hopefully, is kind of their deal. So if you borrow the entire amount of the house, okay, the bank has no guarantee that anybody in the world's ever going to pay that same amount for the house if you don't buy it and they have to kick you out. So you need a down payment just so that the people that loan you the money are assured of getting at least what they put into you back. Because people don't like to lose money when they loan people money. So. And then the last one here, let's just look at the worst of all is credit cards. Credit cards are great if you pay off what you borrow every time, and unfortunately in our world today, to buy things on the internet, I guess you have to have credit cards. But here's the deal. Here's the deal with credit cards. It said they require monthly payments, and they're fine if you pay it off right away, but if you don't, a lot of times an interest charge is added to the bill at the end of the monthly. The monthly charge is typically 1 or 2% of the unpaid balance, okay, which I thought it was a little higher. I thought they were 18%. I'm not so sure if I'm reading this quite right there. A monthly charge, typically 1 or 2%. So if you borrow $400, 2% would be just $4, but you still have to pay that $400 back. So anyway, let's actually look at a problem, shall we? Turn to practice. Let's go right to a practice problem. And you should be able to figure this out, children. This is not, I have no practice, there it is. Let's look at this one right here. I don't know, why do you keep doing that to me? Somebody help me. Practice A. 2 families repaid their 30-year, $300,000 mortgages. One loan was repaid at about $1,800 per month at 6%, and the other at about $2,000 per month at 7%. What is the difference in interest charge over the life of the loan? Anybody thoughts on that? What would you have to do to figure out what their difference in interest they paid was? One loan repaid at about $1,800 a month at 6%, the other at $2,000 per month at 7%. What is the difference in interest charges over the life of the loan? First of all, 30 years, okay, you're paying per month, so you need to change 30 years into months. 30 years is how many months? 30 times 12 and 2. Okay, you're paying for 360 months. Okay, now there's 2 ways to do this. You can figure out how much total this person paid, how much total that person paid, and subtract it. Or there's an easier way, which would be to do what? How much more is this? How much more is this person paying per month? So $200 for 360 months would be So what was the difference in interest one paid? $72,000. And that is just what the difference between a 1% difference. For 30 years, a 1% higher interest rate cost family B $72,000. What's that? The lower interest. This they only had $1,800 a month. They had $2,000 a month, and that was the difference between 1%. Nick Shanks. So what? So buttons on your underwear? What? All right. When Nick figures out his question, we'll move on. You will get there, don't worry. Let's try this next one here. Monthly mortgage payments vary with the length of the loan. The table below shows the approximate monthly payment on $300,000 for 15 years and for 30 years at 7%. Okay? So here's the deal. And it takes a little bit of thinking here, kids. Which one of these would be better for you to do? Pay for 15 years at $2,700 or 30 years at $2,000.
15 years.
You always think, well, this is a lot lower payment, but you have to remember this is half as much. What is the difference in interest charges? Well, good news. The pearly white gate lady is coming. How would you figure out what the difference in your finance charges is? First of all, what is a finance charge? Okay, you're borrowing $300,000. Anything more than that, whatever more than that you pay is the finance charge. Okay, anything over $300,000 that you pay back to whoever loaned you the money is how much they charge you for loaning. So let's do the easy one first. If you take a 30-year loan at $2,000, didn't we already do that? All right, how many payments are you going to make at $2,000? 30 years is? You guys are a rough crowd here. So boom, 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 $720,000 you're going to pay. So how much did you pay in finance charges for that? Right, you paid $420,000 in finance charges. Now the 15-year one, how many months is 15 years? Here, let's be a little help, it's half of that. 180 months, right? At $2,700. 2,700 times 180. Anybody got a calculator? I do. Thank you for asking. 180 times what? 2,700. It really wasn't that hard. But this one, you are paying $486,000. How much is the finance charge for that? Right, $186,000. So which one are you better off with? 15-year. What was the difference in those two? Well, you do your subtracting there. Do you kind of get the gist of this?
Yes.
And let me tell you, you never really care until what happens, John?
You're done with college and the party years are over.
Yes, until life slaps you in the face and you actually have to do this. And you go, what? It's the same thing with taxes. You guys don't care about taxes.
Oh.
Why? Because you don't have that job where when you look at your paycheck and your stuff and you go, the government took $800 out of my check this month. $800 bucks. Well, not out of my check. They might have taken a nickel or two because that's how much I paid. But some of your parents' checks, they probably take that. All right, so I'm going to give you a chance to do this and you see if you can figure out this whole mortgage consumer. This is consumer mathematics. I am sure, ladies and gentlemen, that when you go to high school,